Picture your ancestor at nightfall, out in the open, with no walls and no door, no claws, no fangs, no real speed. A hyena can run faster over open ground. A leopard can see in low light far better than a human eye can, then haul its kill into a tree. Your ancestor has none of that. Slow legs, soft skin, blunt little fingernails instead of blades. And the sun is going down. This is not a metaphor for danger. For millions of years, it was Tuesday. So here's the real question. If you strip away fire, walls, and guns and put a small, clawless ape back into a landscape full of predators, how does that ape make it through the night even once, let alone long enough to become us? The honest answer starts with a hard truth. Sometimes it didn't tea. In South Africa, researchers examined the skull of the Taung Child, a young Australopithecus dating back roughly 2.8 million years. For decades, people suspected some large mammalian predator had killed it. Then researchers compared damage on the skull with the remains of modern primates killed by large African raptors. The pattern was striking. Damage around the eye sockets and skull closely resembled the feeding marks powerful birds of prey leave on primates today. Your ancestors were not just being hunted from the grass, they could be hunted from the sky. That reframes the whole problem. This was not about one enemy. Danger could come from the ground, from the darkness, and sometimes from above. And the body trying to survive all of it had almost no natural weapons. The first real equalizer was fire, and it may have mattered for more than warmth. At a site in Spain called Valdecarros, researchers analyzing sediment roughly 245,000 years old found chemical traces consistent with controlled burning alongside stone tools and animal bone. The researchers proposed cooking and predator deterrence as two possible reasons those fires mattered. That second possibility changes the scene. Firelight, heat, and smoke can make a camp a far less inviting place for a large carnivore to approach. A spear protects the person holding it. A fire can change the space around an entire group, but fire creates its own problem. It needs fuel. Fuel runs out. Someone has to keep it alive through the coldest, darkest hours, exactly when many predators are most active. A fire that dies stops being protection and becomes a patch of cold ash. So people also needed places where that protection could work. And that is where caves become much stranger than the word shelter suggests. You might imagine a cave as a prehistoric safe house. The archaeological record suggests something messier. At Denisova Cave in Siberia, microscopic analysis of sediment revealed repeated traces left by both hominins and large carnivores across the cave's long history. Hyenas, wolves, bears, and humans all used the space at different times. At Teixonares Cave in Spain, researchers mapped those patterns in greater detail. Human hearths, tools, and butchered bone tended to cluster closer to the entrance, where daylight still reached. Carnivore traces appeared more often deeper inside the cave. The picture is not of humans permanently conquering a cave. It is of a shelter changing tenants. Humans repeatedly used the brighter entrance. Carnivores repeatedly used the darker interior. Over thousands of years, the same cave could pass back and forth between them. A cave was not automatically safe because it had a roof. Sometimes the roof came with previous occupants. Fire and shelter bought time, but eventually something still had to reach danger before danger reached you. That is where wooden weapons enter the story, and they are older and more sophisticated than most people expect. At Schöningen in Germany, archaeologists recovered wooden spears and throwing sticks shaped from spruce and pine alongside the butchered remains of large animals. The assemblage is now generally placed at roughly 300,000 years old. The wood had been deliberately split, scraped, balanced, and shaped. Some of the weapons were light enough to throw. That matters because a throwing weapon changes the geometry of danger. You no longer have to wait until teeth and claws are within arm's reach. And researchers studying these weapons have suggested that lighter projectiles may also have allowed a wider range of group members to practice and participate. Weapons like these show how coordination could begin replacing raw strength, whether during a hunt or when danger came too close. A human did not need to become stronger than a hyena. A group needed ways to make strength less important. You would expect that story to end with humans finally on top. It doesn't. Not cleanly. In Morocco, researchers examined a roughly 500,000-year-old thigh bone from an early Middle Pleistocene human. The surface was covered with tooth pits and gnaw marks most consistent with a large carnivore, probably a hyena. The body had been eaten. What researchers cannot tell is whether the animal killed the individual or scavenged the body afterward. Either way, fire and tools had not made humans untouchable. And yet there is another pattern hiding in the fossil record. Direct evidence of violent encounters between hominins and large carnivores is surprisingly limited compared with how often they occupied the same landscapes and competed for many of the same resources. That does not prove humans had mastered some perfect system of predator avoidance, but it raises a possibility. Maybe one of the most important survival strategies was not winning confrontations. Maybe it was preventing them. Fire could make a camp harder to approach. Shelter choice could reduce exposure. Group weapons could make getting too close more dangerous. Awareness of tracks, sounds, feeding sites, and animal behavior could help people decide where not to be. The goal was not to beat a hyena-esque jaw. The goal was to make sure the jaw never reached you. And the relationship between humans and predators was not purely one-directional either. Sometimes the same carnivores that competed with humans could also create opportunities. At Valonay Cave in southern France, cut marks on animal bones suggest early humans scavenged carcasses that carnivores had already brought into the cave. A predator could be competition, it could be danger, and under the right circumstances, it could indirectly leave food behind. So the world our ancestors survived was never a simple story of villain and victim. It was a shared, contested landscape. Fire marked boundaries, shelters changed occupants, thrown weapons altered distance. Predators could kill you, compete with you, or leave behind something worth eating if you waited until the right moment. Humans survived not because they became the strongest animal in that world. They survived by changing the terms of the encounter. And maybe that is why darkness still feels different when you cannot see what is inside it. For most of our evolutionary history, darkness did not mean nothing was there. It meant you could not know what was there,